Yo, what's up, everybody? This is William from For the Billions back with another video. I wanted to make this video today to talk about this article I saw from Business Insider. It's a guy who says that he had struggled to find a job after he graduated from college, and he ended up changing his name on the application so that way he was able to actually land a job. So let's talk about this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button, or if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. So let's go ahead and get into the article here, and then we can go from there. I'll give my commentary. So here we go. We have the article from Business Insider. Says, I struggled to find a job after college, so I changed my name on my resume and landed one almost immediately. So if he changed his name on his resume, that means he was having an issue with getting interviews. Let's see why he was. So you can see it's a black guy on the thumbnail. So, I mean, hey, it's hard out here, man. It's hard out here. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So it says, I struggled to find a job after college. So this as told to essay is based on a transcribed conversation. Okay, so this is a transcription. So they were just having a conversation. So it's not actually like written out. So the guy's name is, I can't even pronounce his name. I'm not even gonna really try. Well, I'll try it. So I think it is Mukhtar Kadiri. Mukhtar Kadiri, I guess that's what his name is gonna be for this video. So he's a 39-year-old from the Greater Toronto area. That's another thing. Toronto, the whole time I've been growing up, I always thought it was Toronto, and then somebody from Canada was like, no, you Americans always say Toronto when it's Toronto. The pronunciation just doesn't make sense to me. From the Greater Toronto area, about how he decided to go by a different name in the workplace. The following has been edited for length and clarity. My dad named me Mukhtar after his friend from high school. It means chosen one in Arabic. Okay, that's kind of fire. Out of all the names, the chosen one, it actually sounds kind of fire. I can't even lie to you. I've come to really like my name. It feels special and mysterious, but it took me a while to get there. In 2007, I added an English-sounding name to my resume in the hopes that it could help me land a job. I don't know if that's the reason I landed a role in the end, but I felt I wanted to fit in and not be looked at as an other. I'm sure that there's a lot of people from other countries that do that same thing. I know a lot of people from like Asian countries, they change their name to a more American sounding name. So like I remember I met some lady, and her name was Summer. And then I was like, okay, it's a nice name. And then turns to find out like her name was something completely different. And I was like, oh, okay, so you change your name so that way it's more acceptable within the U.S. or the American economy, I guess. I thought using an English-sounding name as an alias would remove barriers between myself and an employer. I was born in Edo State, Nigeria. Although my friend is Muslim, I was mostly surrounded by Christian people where I was growing up. Having an Arabic name signaled to people that I was Muslim. I remember feeling different and being teased by other kids because of my religion. It's just interesting because even the place where he's from, he was getting bullied, and then he goes over to Toronto. He wanted to be able to assimilate a little bit more easily. So even though he had his home from Nigeria, it didn't seem like he really had much of a home, if that makes sense. Too many people making fun of him. I moved to the U.S. for college in 2002 and studied petroleum engineering at Texas Tech University. I continue to feel like a minority at college. In Nigeria, there are certain ways of classifying people, such as by tribe and religion. But in the U.S., I found people are stereotyped based on their race. Yeah, this is another thing, too, is that a lot of African people, like when they move over to the United States, is a little bit different in how everything moves as far as like race. Like other countries, they aren't, and I'm sure it's going to be a little bit different based off the country, but just like how he said in this article, they aren't really classified by race in the same way, right? Because in the United States, we had slavery, which a lot of other countries may not have firsthand experience. People thought I'd fit into the African American box because of the way I looked, but I didn't feel like I fit into any category. And see, that's another thing. they don't really consider themselves African American. Well, he's Nigerian. Toward the end of my college experience, I started preparing to get a job in petroleum engineering. I attended all the career workshops, worked on my resume, applied for jobs, and went to interviews. I noticed some of my American classmates were getting lots of offers, but I was struggling to land an opportunity. I was an international student, and my employer would have to sponsor my H-1B visa. That also made it harder for me to be hired than my American peers. See, another thing about the H-1B visas is that you have a lot of people who go from other countries over here to the United States, and it's extremely difficult to find a job that will sponsor H-1B visa. But also, when they do find that, let's say that you're a contractor, it's kind of hard to move around like how U.S. citizens would be, where they can just go off to another company and then keep moving around and stuff like that, because a lot of it's just more competitive. It's a lot of people who are also trying to get H-1B visas. So you may see a lot of people saying that, hey, they came from another country, they work at a company, and then they may not have the same work-life balance as somebody who's a U.S. citizen because, like, they're a contractor or something like that. They are on a H-1B visa, and they have to work a little bit more hours because they can't really stand up for themselves because, hey, if I stand up for myself and get fired from this job that's sponsoring me to be here, then I can't really say like no to the extra hours or no to the extra project and stuff like that. And only reason I'm saying this is because because I worked in corporate, and this is the sentiment that I would get from a lot of other people who are on H-1B visas. They say how competitive it is and how you really have to take on more responsibility just to be able to kind of keep the ability to live in the United States. I struggled to get interviews after graduating from college. I graduated in 2007 without a job, which made me very anxious. During college, I could do some interviews on campus as companies arranged to interview us through the department. But I noticed I wasn't landing as many interviews after graduating. Studies have shown that resumes with English sounding names get more job callbacks. Some of my Nigerian friends had English names, and it seemed that they could navigate spaces more easily. For example, I felt they might be perceived as less strange and more familiar at social events and have conversations that flowed more easily than mine. Oh yeah, I can attest to that. Is that sometimes when you go to an event and you meet somebody from like another country and their name is not what you're used to saying, it can take some time to kind of like remember their name and stuff like that. You kind of have to like repeat it a few times before you can actually, okay, this is his name. This is Mukhtar. I think that's how you pronounce it. So he says, I added the name Mark next to my first name on my resume, putting it in quotation marks. The name had some of the same letters as Mukhtar. I thought it would create less of a barrier between me and an interviewer if they could call me by an alias that was easier to pronounce. Shortly after doing that, I landed an interview with an oil and gas service company. I don't remember exactly how long it took or how many jobs I applied to with the new resume, but it felt like the opportunity came almost immediately. The interviewer called me Mark, and eventually the company offered me a petroleum engineering job. Oh, this is another thing. I remember I used to work with a few people who I changed their names as well. So I think this is like a thing that's kind of commonplace now for people with different sounding names. But, non-American names, I should say, non-American or non-English names. It's possible that I would have gotten called for the interview even if I didn't use Mark, but I think the timing was interesting. I cringe when people call me Mark at work. I started the job in December 2007. My department was developing software for oil and gas companies to use. I didn't legally change my name, so the name Mukhtar was still in my work email address, but my boss referred to me as Mark. I introduced myself as Mark, and most of my colleagues initially referred to me using that name. There was always a part of me that didn't quite like being called Mark. I cringed when people used it. I felt like I was denying my roots or being a bit fake. No one forced me to change my name, but I felt compelled to do it to avoid being a failure. I really wanted a job. Over time, I began to transition back to using Mukhtar. A Nigerian colleague who was like a mentor to me started using my real name. After 8 months on the job, I relocated to Oman, where I stayed for around 5 years before moving to the UAE. It was an opportunity for me to start afresh. Since Arabic is widely spoken in the Middle East, I would introduce myself to new people as Mukhtar, not Mark. Most people recognized my name, and some would tell me it was beautiful. This was a huge contrast to people butchering my name in the US and Nigeria. I felt like I belonged and wasn't strange. I didn't have to apologize for who I was. When I was looking for a new job in a new country, I refused to go by an alias again. In Oman, I applied for Canadian permanent residency through a skilled worker program and was granted it in 2015. My visa was tied to my employment in the Middle East. There was always a sense of uncertainty, so I wanted to get PR status in Canada. My family and I relocated to Canada in 2017 because of visa issues in the UAE. I didn't really know anyone or have a network in Canada, so I struggled to find a job. Employers in Canada place a lot of emphasis on having local Canadian experience, making it harder for me to land a role. One of my friends who had downplayed his native African name to emphasize his English and easy sounding name suggested I change my name to help me get a job. A lot of Christian Nigerians will have native and Christian names, so when they move abroad, they might emphasize their Christian names. It may not necessarily mean changing their name, but simply using their middle name as their first name. His suggestion brought back all those feelings of inauthenticity and guilt I faced when I went by Mark, so I refused. I didn't want to relive the same experience again. I wouldn't erase a core part of me just to get a job. I kept applying to jobs and networking, and a few months later, I landed 2 job offers for project manager roles. I started working for a tech company in the healthcare sector and stayed in that role for nearly 4 years. I feel like I'm being authentic now that I use my real name at work. I'm proud of the journey I've taken to arrive at this place. I've learned to like my otherness. Nowadays, when I speak to people, I'll volunteer the meaning of my name without them even asking. It took me a while to get to a place where I love who I am and where I'm from, but now I embrace my identity. All right, awesome. So let me know what you guys think about that article. Let me know what you think about the commentary as well. If you enjoy this type of content, please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And also hit that bell notification icon if you want to be notified whenever I make new videos on YouTube. Also, guys, please go ahead and check out the Before the Billions website so that you can join the newsletter, and the Discord is also in the description down below so that way you can speak with me or anybody else within the BTB squad. I would really appreciate it. Guys, that was a great article, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next video. Please do not forget to build your billions.